Hello, everyone. Today I will tell you the second story that I found on Reddit, and I wanted to share this crazy story. I wish you a pleasant viewing. My stepfather built the perfect life for our family for years, but a random social media photo forced me to break into his basement. Now my life is ruined. Part 1. The Perfect Facade. You know that feeling when everything seems too good to be true? When you look at your life and think, I couldn't have pulled such a lucky ticket, there has to be a catch. That's exactly the feeling I want to start with. It took me 19 years to realize there really was a catch, and it turned out to be scarier than any nightmare. Until I was 7, I grew up with just my mom and my younger sister. Our biological father vanished right after she was born, leaving us with a mountain of debt in a crumbling rented apartment on the outskirts of town. I barely remember those days, but the smell of cheap macaroni cooked in water and my mom's quiet crying in the kitchen at night, when she thought we were asleep, are forever burned into my memory. She worked 2 jobs, her hands always dry and cracked from cleaning chemicals, a deep, mortal exhaustion trapped in her eyes. And then Arthur entered our lives. He burst into our grey world like a hurricane of warmth, confidence, and safety. Arthur was a tall, fit man with a military bearing. He was a former officer who had served in several hot zones, but he possessed a surprisingly soft, deep voice that instantly calmed you down. When he looked at my mom, it felt as though no one else existed in the entire universe. Their romance moved fast, but Arthur never pressured my sister or me. He didn't try to immediately become our new dad. Instead, he was just there. A lock broke on the door. The next day, a heavy, solid oak door was installed. I needed sneakers for gym class. We drove to the mall and he bought me the best pair, teaching me how to lace them properly to protect my ankles. A year later, they got married. Arthur moved us to a huge, spacious house in the suburbs. It was a dream home, a manicured lawn, massive windows flooding the living room with light. And most importantly, each of us finally had our own bedroom. Our family of 3 exhausted people transformed into a strong, happy fortress of 4. My mum bloomed. She quit her brutal jobs, took up gardening, her skin smoothed out, and her laughter filled our home once again. Arthur became an absolute authority for me. He taught me everything, from how to take a punch in a fight to understanding that a real man is measured not by his strength, but by his ability to protect the ones he loves. He often repeated a phrase to me that stuck in my head forever. Artem, family is the only thing worth breaking any rule for. If your family is threatened, you destroy the threat before it crosses your doorstep. Back then, those words seemed like the ultimate expression of nobility and honor. If only I knew what he actually meant by that. Part 2. The red flags we ignored. Years went by, I grew up and started university. My sister grew up a bit spoiled but loving, having everything she could ever want. Unlike my own childhood, our house remained a model home. But looking back, I realized the warning signs were always there. We just deliberately plugged our ears so we wouldn't shatter the fairy tale we were living in. First, Arthur hated guests. In all 12 years he lived with my mom, there was never a noisy party, a dinner gathering, or even just my mum's friends over for coffee. If someone wanted to visit her, Arthur would very softly but firmly suggest meeting at a cafe or restaurant, fully covering the bill. He explained this as a military habit. My home is my fortress. I don't want strangers' energy when my children sleep. Mum agreed, considering it a sweet quirk of a protective husband. Second, There was one place in the house where entry was strictly forbidden: the basement. Our house stood on an old, deep foundation, and the basement was massive. Right after moving in, Arthur installed a heavy iron door with a combination code and a biometric fingerprint scanner. He said he set up his private office there, a storage room for old military gear, and a safe for his service weapons. There are loaded firearms and grenades down there, Artem. One wrong move and the house blows up. I am legally responsible for this, so no offense. This is my zone only. He calmly explained to me when I was 13. Naturally, it never even crossed my mind to go down there. But the strangest things were his business trips. 2 or 3 times a year, Arthur would drive off in his car for a week or two. He said these were closed-door veteran gatherings or consulting gigs for the Ministry of Defense. Mobile service in those areas, according to him, didn't work because of signal jammers at the military ranges. He always left at night, quietly packing his bags. And he always returned exhausted, haggard with dark circles under his eyes, but carrying massive bouquets of flowers for Mom and tons of gifts for my sister and me. We got so used to this rhythm that these disappearances became a normal part of our lives, until that one Tuesday, the beginning of the end. Part 3. A Fatal Coincidence. That day, Arthur had been away on his latest trip for 5 days. Mum had gone to the city for a medical checkup, and my sister was at an after-school program. I was home alone, doing remote university classes, sitting in the living room with my laptop, lazily scrolling through local news and social media feeds between lectures on logistics. I stumbled upon a post in a large regional community page. It was a compilation of archival photos from a small provincial town located about 400 kilometers away from us. The author of the post uploaded pictures from the opening of a local memorial for fallen international soldiers, which took place exactly 3 years ago. I scrolled through the photos, looking at the faces of people in military uniforms, until my finger literally froze on the screen. In the third picture, standing in the crowd among officials and veterans, was a man. He wore an expensive civilian suit and dark sunglasses, but that jawline, that scar over his left eyebrow, and that specific military posture were unmistakable. It was Arthur. I smiled and thought, oh cool, stepdad got caught on an official event and didn't tell us. I was about to close the tab when my eyes fell on the woman standing next to him. She was holding his arm. She wore an elegant dress, and on her right ring finger, a gold band clearly gleamed. The exact same ring, with the exact same engraved interlocking lines, was on Arthur's right hand. But that wasn't the scariest part. At that woman's feet stood a little boy, about 4 years old, holding Arthur's other hand. And that boy, he looked incredibly, terrifyingly like a young Arthur. I'd seen my stepfather's old military photos. The resemblance was 100%. My heart skipped a beat. Everything went cold inside. I frantically began searching for information about this woman online. Thanks to modern OSINT and open tags, it took no more than 15 minutes. Her name was Elena. She lived in that small town, and judging by her social media profile, she was married to a successful businessman and consultant named Arthur. Her page was flooded with photos of their perfect family. The pictures spanned the last 7 years. I sat in front of the screen, my head spinning. My perfect stepfather, a man I considered a saint, turned out to be a basic bigamist. He had built a second, full-fledged family, had a child there, and had been skillfully navigating between 2 cities for years, hiding behind military trips. I felt rage. A wild, suffocating rage for my mother. She worshipped him, She prayed for him, and he had turned her life into a farce. In that moment, I made a firm choice. When he got back, I would make his life hell. I would force him to confess everything and leave our lives forever. But first, I needed proof. Real, solid evidence, so he couldn't wiggle out of it or call the social media photos a coincidence or misunderstanding. And then I remembered the basement. Part 4. The Forbidden Zone. I walked up to the iron door at the end of the first floor hallway. It had always seemed like a silent guardian, but now it looked like a challenge. The code lock. The electronic panel. I had never seen what numbers Arthur entered. He always blocked the panel with his back. I started guessing combinations. Mom's birthday. Wrong. Their wedding anniversary. Wrong. Mine and my sister's birthdays. Error. The device beeped quietly, flashing red after each failed attempt. I had 2 attempts left before the system would likely lock down or send a notification to Arthur's phone. I closed my eyes and tried to think about his psychology. Arthur is a military tactician. He wouldn't use basic dates that are easy to figure out. He would use something hardwired into his subconscious. His military dog tag number, his first unit number. I didn't have that data. And then it hit me. He had a tattoo on his chest. The old tactical number of the helicopter he flew on during his first combat deployments. I had seen that number on one of his old black and white photos that he once showed me with immense pride. 9042. With trembling fingers, I typed 9042. A faint click echoed inside the door. The internal lock turned and a green LED lit up. The fingerprint scanner, to my luck, turned out to be disabled. Evidently, Arthur figured a 4-digit password and a heavy door were more than enough to protect it from a family that unconditionally followed his rules. I pulled the handle toward me. The door opened completely silently. A gust of cool air drifted out, smelling of expensive tobacco, leather, and something else. A strange, barely noticeable chemical aroma, like a mix of medicine and dampness. I turned on my phone flashlight and took a step down the concrete stairs. Each step brought me closer to the truth, but I had no idea how terrifying it would actually be. The basement was huge and split into several zones. The first room really did look like a study. A massive desk, a turned-off laptop, shelves filled with books on military history and tactics, and a closet with old military uniforms adorned with medals. In the corner stood a large weapon safe. I walked up to the desk. A closed leather journal lay on it. I opened it, expecting to see financial records or the address of his second family. But what I saw there made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. They were lists. Dozens of pages written in Arthur's neat, small handwriting. Next to each name were dates, addresses, license plate numbers, and strange abbreviations like target eliminated, conservation, asset transfer. On some pages, photos of men and women were glued in. Next to many of them were thick, black crosses. I frantically flipped through the pages until I reached a section dated 12 years ago, the year Arthur appeared in our lives. There was my biological father's name. Next to his name was a date, May 14th, 2014, and a laconic note in Arthur's hand. Threat to target, Tatiana and children eliminated. Body disposed of in Sector G4. Property rights annulled. My phone almost slipped from my hands. My biological father didn't abandon us. He was killed. And it was done by the man I had called Dad for the last 12 years. But that was just the beginning. Part 5. The horror inside. My breathing became shallow and heavy. Panic was washing over me in icy waves. I wanted to run out of this cursed basement, grab my mom and sister, and escape as far away as possible. But my eyes caught the far wall of the study. Behind the uniform closet, there was another door, a small plastic one, the kind usually installed in medical labs, and from behind it, a faint rhythmic sound was echoing. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of a working medical monitor. On legs that felt like lead, I walked up to that door. It wasn't locked. I pushed it open and shone my flashlight inside. What I saw defied human reason. It was a scene straight out of a movie about a mad scientist, but it was happening in the basement of my own home. The room was equipped like a sterile intensive care unit. There was an actual hospital bed, IV stands, a vital signs monitor, and a bunch of equipment whose purpose I didn't know. A man was lying on the bed. He was tangled in a web of tubes and wires. A ventilator tube was inserted into his throat. His body was horrifyingly emaciated. His skin had an earthy grey tint, and his head was completely shaved. I slowly stepped closer, aiming the flashlight beam at his face. The man looked to be about 50 years old. His features seemed vaguely familiar, but due to the extreme emaciation, I couldn't tell who he was. On the nightstand lay a medical chart in a plastic clipboard. I picked it up. On the first page was a large photo of this man in his prime. A man in a sharp suit with a confident gaze. Under the photo was a name, Leonid Andreevich Voronov. I froze. Everyone in our region knew that name. A major businessman, owner of logistics terminals and construction companies who had vanished without a trace exactly 2 years ago. Back then, it was all over the news. Tycoon kidnapped. Investigation hits a dead end. Ransom refused. The country's best investigators looked for him but didn't find a single lead. He had been here the whole time, under our feet. While we celebrated birthdays, watched TV in the living room and laughed, this man was slowly wasting away in a drug-induced coma 5 meters beneath us. Next to the chart lay a voice recorder and a laptop connected to a strange terminal. I turned on the recorder. Arthur's calm, measured voice played back. Day 742. Subject Voronov is stable. The dosage of sedatives keeps him in a deep sleep. The transfer of the remaining offshore accounts is 94% complete. The subject has fulfilled his function. Following the final transaction, a complete shutdown of life support is planned. Preparation of the site in Sector D2 is complete. Arthur wasn't a retired veteran. He wasn't a consultant, he was a professional, cold-blooded kidnapper, liquidator, and black market banker. He targeted wealthy, isolated people, all those who had conflicts with the law, kidnapped them, kept them in his basement for months, drained all their money through shell companies and electronic keys, and then destroyed them. And our perfect family, our house, it was the perfect camouflage. Who would suspect an exemplary family man, a father of 2, a loving husband, and a respected veteran of keeping kidnapped millionaires in his basement? We were his human shield, his alibi, his stage props. And his second family in the other town, that was just a backup airfield, a duplicate camouflage in case things went sideways here. Part 6, the trap snaps, shut absolute panic set in. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead, and my hands shook so violently I could barely hold my phone. I realized I had made the worst mistake of my life. I had stepped into a place from which there was no return. If Arthur found out I'd been down here, his dogma about protecting the family would evaporate instantly. To him, I would become a threat that needs to be destroyed before it crosses the doorstep. I dropped the medical chart onto the nightstand, ran out of the sterile room, and rushed toward the basement exit. I bolted up the stairs, gasping for air in sheer terror, flew into the first floor hallway and slammed the iron door shut with force. I quickly punched in the code 9042 to lock it. The mechanism clicked. The green light switched back to red. I turned around to sprint to my room, pack my documents, and get out of this house. But as I turned, my heart flat out stopped. At the far end of the dark hallway, by the front door, stood a man, a tall silhouette, the familiar military jacket. In his hand, he held a small travel suitcase. Arthur. He had returned 2 days early. He stood completely motionless, and in the dim light of the hallway, I couldn't see his expression. Only the reflection of the streetlights from the windows caught his cold, empty eyes. "Hi, Artem," he said quietly in his deep, soothing voice. But right now, that voice sounded like a death sentence. "Why aren't you in class?" I tried to pull myself together. All my acting skills, all my energy went into keeping my voice from shaking. "Hey, Arthur, yeah, they cancelled our last lecture today. I decided to come down and check why the hallway light was flickering. Thought maybe something was wrong with the fuse box." Arthur slowly started walking down the hallway toward me, step by step. His military boots thudded heavily against the hardwood floor. Each thud echoed like a hammer in my skull. He stopped right in front of me. He smelled of expensive leather, cigarettes, and that exact same chemical scent from the basement. He looked at the iron door, then looked back at me. His eyes narrowed. He noticed that I was breathing heavily and that sweat was glistening on my forehead. "The fuse box is fine, Artem," he said softly, taking another step until our faces were just inches apart. "And the light never flickers here. You know the rules of this house." "Yeah, I know," I managed to choke out, backing up toward the living room. "Sorry, I just made a mistake. I'm going to my room. I need to study." I tried to step around him, but with a fluid, almost graceful movement, he blocked my path with his massive frame. He placed his heavy hand on my shoulder. His fingers clamped down with a steel grip. This wasn't a friendly gesture. It was a restraint. "You're pale, son," he said, a strange, terrifying half smile appearing on his face. "And your pulse is racing on your neck. It's like you've seen a ghost. Or did you find something you weren't supposed to be looking for?" In that moment, I knew. He knew everything. Maybe he did have an alert on his phone for when the correct code was entered. Maybe there were hidden cameras in the basement that caught me. Hiding it any longer was pointless, but admitting it meant dying right then and there. "Arthur, let me go, please," I said quietly, looking him straight in the eyes. In that moment, a desperate courage woke up inside me. I saw the photos from the other town. "Elena, your son." Arthur froze for a second. His smile vanished. His face hardened into a blank, emotionless mask. He slowly released my shoulder and sighed, looking like a disappointed teacher whose star student had just flunked a simple test. "Ah, I see. Social media. The cursed digital age." He shook his head, frowning. "I kept you guys safe from this garbage for so long. I created a perfect world for you, Artem. Your mother is happy. Your sister wants for nothing. You're studying at a prestigious university. Everything I did so that my family would have a future." "Your family," I snapped, raising my voice. "You killed my father. You're keeping a man in a coma in the basement right now. You're a monster, Arthur. Your whole life is a lie." Arthur reacted instantly. With a lightning-fast move, he closed the distance and pinned me against the wall, slamming his forearm against my throat. I didn't even have time to react. His military reflexes were flawless. "Shut up," he hissed directly into my ear. His voice was no longer soft. It was the voice of a ruthless predator. "Your bio dad was a piece of trash who beat your mother and dragged you into debt." I cleansed the world of him. And Voronov? Voronov is a thief and a corrupt bastard who made his millions on the blood of others. I am simply restoring justice and taking what belongs to me by right of strength. He loosened his grip on my throat, but didn't back away. "Here is what we are going to do," he continued calmly, as if planning a routine grocery run. "Your mum and sister will never know. You will pack your things. I will tell your mum that you were offered an urgent internship in another region or abroad. You will leave. I will fully fund your life, your tuition, and buy you an apartment. But you will vanish from this city forever. If you breathe a single word to the police, remember, I have a second family, and I have your mother and sister here. One word from me and their lives turn into a nightmare. Do you understand me, Artem?" I looked at him and knew he wasn't joking. He had calculated this option in the few seconds we were talking. To him, I was just a variable in an equation that needed to be isolated. "I understand," I wheezed. "Good boy," Arthur patted my cheek. "Go to your room and pack. We leave in 2 hours. Part 7. The Climax. Arthur made one massive, fatal mistake. He judged me by his own standards. He thought that fear for my own skin and the lives of my family would force me to submit. He forgot the very lesson he taught me. If your family is threatened, you destroy the threat before it crosses your doorstep. And the ultimate threat to my family right now was him. When I went up to my room, I had exactly 2 hours. My hands stopped shaking. The panic was gone, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp calculation. I realized that if I just left, he would eventually get rid of all of us, the second we became a liability. I pulled out my phone, but I didn't call the local police. Our local department could be bought by him, or they might just dismiss a 19-year-old kid's story as a family dispute, giving Arthur time to escape. Instead, I went to the official portal of the State Security Service and the Organized Crime Unit. They had an emergency hotline for kidnappings and high-level extortion. I filled out the emergency report form. I attached everything. Photos of the journal pages. I'd managed to snap a few photos while in the study without even realizing it. Pure muscle memory. The photo of Voronov on the hospital bed in the basement, and our exact GPS coordinates. At the bottom, I wrote, "Subject Voronov is alive in critical condition at the specified address. The suspect is armed, has advanced military training, and is holding a family hostage. Time is running out." I hit send. 40 minutes passed. I sat on my bed alone with my packed backpack, listening to Arthur calmly walking around the kitchen downstairs, humming some old military tune. It was the most horrifying wait of my life. Every minute felt like an eternity. And then, hell broke loose. Suddenly, the windows in the first-floor living room shattered into a million pieces with a deafening crash. Flashbang grenades exploded. The entire house shook from the roaring shouts. "Special forces! Everybody down! Hands behind your head! SWAT!" I hit the floor of my room, covering my head with my hands. From downstairs came the sounds of a violent struggle, heavy thuds, breaking dishes, and a short burst of automatic gunfire. Then, a heavy silence fell, punctuated only by tactical commands. 2 minutes later, my bedroom door was kicked open. Officers in heavy tactical gear, masks and rifles flooded the room. I was pinned down, roughly but professionally, cuffed, and led outside. Our entire yard was blinded by the flashing red and blue lights of police cruisers and ambulances. Neighbors were staring out of their windows in terror. As they led me past the porch, I saw Arthur. He was lying face down on the grass, covered in blood, his hands secured with heavy zip ties. He had been shot through his left shoulder. But even in that moment, as his empire of lies crumbled, he managed to turn his head toward me. He locked his eyes onto mine with that sharp, piercing gaze. There was no anger in his eyes. There was a strange, chilling sense of approval. He gave me a barely perceptible nod, as if saying, "Good move, son. You learned my lesson." Epilogue. 6 months have passed since that day. Our life was turned into ruins that we are still trying to sort through. My mum suffered a massive nervous breakdown. She spent 3 months in a psychiatric clinic, unable to comprehend that the man she shared a bed with for 12 years was a monster and the killer of her first husband. She's slowly recovering now, but she doesn't smile anymore. The light that Arthur once brought into her eyes is gone forever. My sister completely withdrew into herself. She gets bullied at school, even though we changed districts and moved to a different province. To everyone, we are still the family of that basement monster. Our beautiful house was seized and will be auctioned off to pay restitution to Arthur's victims. Leonid Voronov, the businessman from the basement, was saved by doctors. He survived, though he was left disabled after 2 years of being pumped with heavy sedatives. His family paid us a small sum as a token of gratitude for saving his life. And that money is currently keeping my mom in therapy and paying rent for a modest 2-bedroom apartment. Arthur is currently in a maximum security pre-trial detention center. The investigation into his case is classified, but from what I've gathered from lawyers, he is being charged with over 11 counts of kidnapping and liquidation across the country. He is facing life in prison without the possibility of parole. His second wife, Elena, was also left with nothing. Her life was destroyed in the exact same way ours was. Sometimes we message each other on social media. 2 broken families destroyed by the exact same man. I sit in our new small apartment, looking at my sleeping mother and sister. I know I did the right thing. I saved a man and I stopped a monster. But every night as I fall asleep, I hear that calm, measured whisper in the dark. Family is the only thing worth breaking any rule for. And the scariest part, I'm terrified that a part of Arthur will always stay inside of me.